So we're skipping a ton of math here. We're just going to try to do this graphically and more descriptively than sort of proving the algebra. So the idea is that for a given pair of assets, asset 1 and asset 2, we can achieve any spot on this allocation line. The shape of the allocation line is a function of the correlation coefficient or the degree of diversification. We know the greater the diversification, the further to the left. So let's pick one. Let's assume that we've stumbled on two assets. The first one is a 1320 asset. The second is an 812 asset. And the correlation coefficient is 30%. So this is what the allocation set looks like for the correlation coefficient equal to 30%. I can be all in asset 1 and have 8 and 12. Asset 2 and have 8 and 12. I can be in asset 1 and have 13 and 20, or I can have some combination between them, but because they're not perfectly positively correlated, I don't move along a diagonal straight line. I move along this parabola looking thing, and so for any return, I can actually achieve a risk that is lower than I would be able to achieve if this were a straight line. And so this is my portfolio allocation set. So the next question is, where do I want to be on this line? And the first thing I can do is I can see that, well, I know I want to be somewhere above the minimum risk spot. And I don't know what the value is for this minimum risk spot. We're not going to bother to figure it out, but I can just show it on the graph. And I can see that there is no possible lower risk than this. There's lower return and higher return, but those both have higher risk. Well, I know that I don't want to be anywhere below this line because I can see that anywhere below this line is dominated by anywhere below this dotted red line, because anywhere below this dotted red line on the black line is dominated by the minimum risk spot. It's also dominated by something directly above it. So if I chose to be on this particular spot, I would earn this level of return and incur this much risk, but I could also be at this spot with the same risk and much higher return. So now I know that I would only want to be on this upper part. I don't have to worry about what's down here, but I'm still not sure where I want to be on this portion of the curve. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add a risk-free asset. And so we're going to now have a 3-asset universe. Asset 1, asset 2, and now a risk-free asset. And we're going to add a 5% risk-free asset. And what I want to do is I want to consider a combined portfolio A. First thing I want to do is I want to think about this spot A on this curve. If I choose this spot A on this curve, it means that I can draw a cow between here and here. And I can choose any spot on this line. Technically, this should be kinked once I get past A, but for now, let's just leave it where it is and assume that I can both borrow and lend at the same rate. And so therefore, I can draw a straight cow. So this is the cow through point A. And what I'm doing here is I'm choosing some allocation between asset 1 and asset 2 that puts me at effectively the minimum risk spot. And I'm saying, let's combine this minimum risk spot with the risk-free. And I know that I can be anywhere on this green capital allocation line. The next question is, well, what about portfolio P right here? What if I, instead of choosing this spot on this allocation line, I choose this spot by having less of asset 2 and more of asset 1, and that puts me to spot P. And so here's the point, is that the risky portfolio P, this cow, the blue cow, is better than the green cow. Any spot on the green line is dominated by a spot on the blue line. I would never want to be anywhere on the green line. Therefore, I would never choose portfolio A. What I would do is I would choose the allocation between asset 1 and asset 2 that puts me here to portfolio P. And now I can allocate anywhere on the blue line, which is better than anywhere on the green line. So every spot on Cal A is dominated by a spot on Cal P. For any spot on A, we can move straight up onto the blue line and earn more return for the same risk. So therefore, we would never choose A when P is available, and it is available. So here's the big question. How do we find P? How do we find the spot on this curve which provides the best possible cow? And the way to think about the best possible capital allocation line, and I've drawn sort of a random one here at the minimum risk portfolio, and I've drawn the best one at spot P. This one is better because it has a steeper slope. And there is no possible capital allocation line that has a steeper slope than this one. I can never find anything else on this line combined with the risk-free that produces a steeper slope. If I move further up the black line here, then any cow is going to have a flatter slope than the blue line. And if I move down here, again, it's going to have a flatter slope. The blue line will dominate. And so the optimal portfolio P on the black line is the one that produces the cow with the steepest risk-return trade-off, the steepest slope. And I can see that any spot on this capital allocation line, which we would then call a combined portfolio, will dominate the combined portfolio anywhere else. So how do I find this? How do I find the weights of asset 1 and the weights of asset 2, W1 and W2, that give us this best portfolio? Well, we have to do more calculus.